Friends, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. This is Tim and Kimberly, and we have been talking about the mysterious doctrine of love.
Doctrine of love.
Doctrine. No, it's
Wow.
the mysteries of love.
The mysteries of love. I like that
Yeah,
word
my
better.
darling, I have the doctrine of love for you.
That sounds super not romantic.
Yeah.
And I'm out.
Yeah.
You know what's good you said mysteries, though, because
No,
honestly, the definition of love is so mysterious and has been since the beginning of time. And that's why it's so important that we figure out, based on God's word, what love really is and what it's not. Because our culture defines what love is. How we were raised defines what love is. Movies, books you read, all that kind of stuff. And that's a mistake.
Yeah. In fact, last time we started talking about what it's not. The first week we talked about, this is our third week. The first week we talked about what it is. It's kind and it's patient. And then
Right.
we talked about what it's not, that it's not prideful. And we had three words for that. We missed the fourth word, which is rude. So that's rude.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to pick that up.
Love is not
at the beginning
rude.
here. Yeah,
So-
and then we're talking about what it's not. Second part of that is, we'll read that in just a moment, but just a real quick definition of love. In the Bible, there are four kinds of love. There's romantic love, which involves, marriage, involves dating and all those things. But it also, in the appropriate place, involves sexuality. The second one is familial love. It's that innate love you feel for your child, your spouse, mainly your parents, your siblings, and your children.
Right.
We hope you feel it for your spouse.
Yeah.
But it's not the same. This biological connection is really powerful. And then the third thing is friendship love, the kind of love that is strong because there's a give and take. And the fourth one is unconditional love, which all of 1 Corinthians 13 is about that unconditional love, agapeo type love, where you love somebody irrespective of their behavior. It's about your relationship. So what we're doing is we're looking at 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4 through 7 and kind of, getting a definition from Scripture on love in this practical series on love. Why don't you read that for us?
Yeah, so we're going to emphasize verse 5 today, but let me start at 4. It says, "Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast, and it's not arrogant or rude." Here we go. "It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful." And then this is 6. "It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things. It believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things."
That is such a high standard for love.
It is actually, and I feel a check in my heart just reading it, because I wish, I wish that it just came naturally to us as humans that this is how we show love.
Yeah, and keep this in mind. You bringing up, you wish it could be natural.
Yeah.
Well, we live in a fallen world.
Right.
We are sinful people. I mean, we're maybe not as bad as we could possibly be, but we do have sin. That sin is real in our life: lust, self-defensiveness, self-fulfillment, self-gratification, those kinds of things. And so it's not natural. It's actually counterintuitive to the flesh. But what we find is that when we attach our hearts to God, His Holy Spirit flows that love through us.
Right.
Or you were
I
going
was just going to say, it's not just our sinful nature, it's our brokenness. We come from, because I guess it would lean into sinfulness, but a lot of times you're born into a version of love that you didn't choose, but you're living the brokenness of that's those sinful choices. So you have not been given the example of these very high standard list of even how to do this. But obviously He wouldn't call us to it and to pursue this definition if we weren't capable of it. But the only way that can happen is if we learn that version of love through Him.
Yeah, and that's the only way we're really capable of loving at that high level is the Holy Spirit has to manifest through. Yeah. So we talk about Spirit filling. Sometimes we get confused about what all that means, but at the evidence of the filling of the Spirit. The fruit is the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love.
Right.
And all those other aspects are aspects of love. The fruit is love. So we wrote down, because we're talking about last week and this week, what love is not. And then we'll talk a little bit about that next week as well. We wrote down a few things that love is not.
So we talked about pride. Pride is definitely not involved in love, being proud. So think about that, in your life. If you are in your relationships with your significant others, your friends, people that you encounter every day, if you think you're a loving person, but you exhibit pride in your speech, how you talk to people, talk down to people, how you interact with your family, the public, that's not love. Love is not jealous. Let me talk about that. Love is not jealous.
Who's jealous around here?
Yeah, that jealousy stems from insecurity, not love.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we clear that up. Boastful. Love is not boastful. Again, boasting means that you're placing yourself, it's connected to pride, in a place of elevation over somebody. Love is not that. Love is
what about humble brag? Can you get away with that? Because I do that a little bit.
And it's not arrogant.
And others.
All of those things kind of marry. And we all feel
those are all pride.
We all feel a sting hearing this stuff because it's part of our nature, and we've gotten it twisted of what love is. But our goal is to be self-reflective and say, is this a part of, when I'm having this conversation with someone I love, am I positioning myself to be elevated above so that I can hold on to my pride? Or do I come off as arrogant? Or is my jealousy, am I twisting it to make it seem like I love that person, but really it's out of my own place of insecurity?
Everybody just turned off the podcast to go, we don't want to hear this.
It's convicting for each of us, just so you know. We're not speaking to you.
And the next one's convicting too.
It is.
And this is a big struggle in relationships.
Yeah, it's about being controlling. And again, that is, that involves someone who leans into being irritable, resentful. Their fears are driving their version of love. And so they want to dominate and control to protect their own vulnerability, their insecurity. It comes off as very toxic in relationships.
Yeah, you made a statement about their fears are driving this. And I think that's an important distinction. Some people think that controlling people are just strong leaders.
Yeah.
Strong leaders know how to delegate and let the people to whom they delegate a task or responsibility do that. Delegating something without the authority to fulfill it is one of the worst parodies of management you can have. So bringing up this issue of fear, when you're afraid, you control. When you are confident, you release.
That's so good. Yeah. That's such a healthy way to define that. And then competitive, when things are always a battle in arguments.
That's why I don't play sports anymore.
Yikes. It's you're fighting to always be right in a conversation, in small ways, and in big ways. Again, that's driven by your insecurity, your fear, and you come off as like an opponent and naturally on the other side. So how is that love? When you're actually it's like you've got your gloves on. In even the small things you want to be right about, it just doesn't matter. But it plays out in relationships because we each are vying for that need to feel more confident or whatever. When love says, I want you to be right.
Yeah.
I actually want you to be right in this situation.
Yeah.
And if I have something to offer in this conversation, that's our human nature, though, is out of our deficit that we want to be competitive with one another, and that's not God's version of love.
And I think that creeps into our relationship too. This competitiveness. I think it's just human nature, and it's counterintuitive to let somebody else win.
Right.
And so two others, and I'll do them real quickly, is fearful. Love is not proud, controlling, competitive. And the fourth one is love is not fearful. When you really, let me put it this way. The more fear you introduce into your intimate relationship. So like for Kimberly and I, if I create a fear base in our relationship, it decreases the love.
And intimacy.
It destroys intimacy because love is where intimacy resides, not in fear.
It flourishes in safety.
So,
not fear.
That produces trust. When you remove the fear, it produces trust and confidence and comfort and reliability. But when you are introducing fear, it's not love. So if for some reason you're manipulating your partner to try to get them to fear so that you can control their behavior, as we said in number 3, that's not love.
It's not love. It's your brokenness showing.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, we all have fear.
We do.
Yeah, we all have fear, but it is when you're attached to God properly, when you are intimate with the Lord, that love is going to flow through you. It's going to diminish the amount of fear. And it's not a light switch. It's not either you're afraid or you're not.
Right.
There are degrees of fear. And the 5th one is love is not weak. Love is strong. There's an old saying, which, and there's some truth to this in the natural realm. And I don't even use that term very often, but in the flesh, the one who loves the most has the least power, or the one who, you might put it this way, and I've heard it this way, the one who loves the least has the greatest power. Think about this. If I don't love you and I'm in a relationship with you, I don't care. And so that gives me power. But if you love me and you care, but I don't care about you, I have power. That is not a relationship. And unfortunately, a lot of relationships go that way. So weakness is not love. Strength is love. Love is the real power position in all relationships. And when we have real love, what happens is we are confidence, we have love, we have power. What we do is we share that with the person we're in a relationship with.
Yeah, it's like a cistern that's filled up, and then it overflows to the people that you interact with.
It's a very biblical concept, by the way.
Well, it's true. Yeah, it's like a well. You pour that well of God's love and the fruit of the Spirit, all those things. And the more you invest in filling your vessel with that, then the overflow is what touches everybody that you touch in your life, even the checker at the grocery store.
So ask yourself this question, or these questions. Am I proud? Am I controlling? Am I competitive? Am I fearful? If I'm weak? Those things are indicators, maybe a red flag, if you will, that says I'm not loving like I should. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just really check yourself and go, gosh, I really love my spouse, or I really love my children, or I really love my brothers, my friends. Check yourself and see if those things are there. So in this passage, we talked about, it talks about it does not insist on its own way. That's that controlling behavior. And it is not irritable or resentful. So let's just spend a few moments talking about those 3 things.
Well, the insisting on its own way is obviously back to controlling behavior, and it's about oneself. It's always, again, like if you're wondering what the definition is of love, it's putting someone else before yourself, I
do that a lot.
And so when you're insisting on your own way and you're controlling someone else, you're making yourself the object of your love. Not that other person. When you love someone, you reduce your need to control. Now, I kind of want to balance this a little bit, because I think what happens is people who have not come from a place of having experienced unconditional, safe love, either in their home or even a relationship with Jesus, they don't necessarily have that to give to someone else. And so they do need to take the time. People would call it self-love, but what I see as even self-love, that's not something you can't give yourself something that you've never had. So again, we point back to Jesus. Like, what is loving yourself? What does that look like? It's giving. It's filling that well with the reflection of how He sees you and how He defines you in His Word and His unconditional love for you, your value, your worth, your beauty, your personality, all of those things. Like, like we run to the wrong places. We run to someone else who's broken to tell us how awesome we are, when we haven't given God a chance to be able to tell you, I created you. I designed you on purpose with this personality. I see you as lovely and perfect and beautiful. And if we would run to him as our source and allow him to fill us up, then we again have something to be able to give, or we're not at least looking for someone else to place that into us, because they may not even have that to give,
Yeah. And I say this a lot, and you've probably heard it if you're a regular listener. I talk about certain things like love and manifestation of love. It's not like it's either on or off. It's degrees. So what Kimberly is talking about is, if you've never seen that, your level of insisting on your own way is going to be different than if you did grow up in that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you don't have it. It just means maybe the degree is you're growing in it. So, and the temptation is to go, okay, then I'll stop insisting on my own way. Well, that's going to fall apart. The goal is to submit to God and say, God, I need you to do this through me.
Yeah.
And the second thing that Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13 is that love is not irritable.
Yikes.
That word. So think about this. The word irritable just means that you're easily provoked. And when you love someone, you are more tolerant. You have a higher level of tolerance. But you got to remember, tolerance has limits.
Sure.
So if somebody's abusing you, you don't continue to let them abuse you.
That's right.
You can love them at a distance to protect from that abuse. But the problem comes in whether there's a false allegation of abuse, and I think we really need to define abuse. But that's a real big problem.
I think most people who are in it know it when they're feeling abused by somebody else. I think it's thrown around a lot in our culture, and I agree that you have to be careful that you don't label somebody or whatever. But I don't know. I'm super sensitive to this, as you know, because I feel like, just given my past and everything, you know, especially in Christianity, we do need clear lines to be able to understand, because, this unconditional love, message is so powerful, and that's what Jesus gives us. But Jesus also set a beautiful example as, I love you enough to say no. This is a boundary. This is not acceptable. This is crossing a line into sin. That's who he is and what he does. And I think in relationships, we can love someone, like you said, from a distance, separating ourselves to say, my love is not going to allow you to abuse me in this situation.
Yeah, I think my point about saying that there are limits to this and we need to define abuse is, some people go, my husband comes home 30 minutes later than he agreed, and he said he got caught up in traffic or he was late at work, and they call that abuse. I would not call that abuse. Now, if it goes on and there's disrespect for your time and so forth, that, is disrespectful. At some point, you're going to have to define what is abuse. What is abuse for you? You're going to have to draw that line. I think abuse is different for some people.
Yeah.
Like, it might be abusive to be called names, while some other people, they can tolerate that. I don't like it. I think that's terrible. But let's make sure we define abuse properly. The third thing that he says it is not resentful. Now, this is an interesting Greek word that word resentful comes from. It comes from a Greek word logizomai. You don't need to know that, except that it's an accounting term. And so when you do books in a business, you have a ledger and you have two sides of that ledger. What are your expenses? What's your income? And you balance that. And what logizomai means, resentful, is where you're going, hey, I did this for you. I want tit for tat. I want you to give to me like I give to you. Well, some people can't give that level.
Right.
And so you have to be careful not to make it that way. And resentment can be, putting things on the ledger, and logizomai is not a love issue, where you're going, okay, what did you do for me lately? It really is about, respect, and all of those things are important. But if you're being very weak on that, it could be a real problem.
Yeah, and a red flag to, being in a relationship where you're feeling like your love is being lost is when you feel that resentment starting to grow into your heart, and that can take flight over time. It can grow. Those feelings of anger and indignation, that feeling of that you can't let go of perceived injustice. Resentment it can turn to bitterness, which we know over time, it destroys all love, if you allow that to stay. And that's why it's so important to step into this resentment, analyze it, look at it. Is this perceived injustice, or is this a real injustice? Let's have some important conversations about this and try to not allow resentment to take up home in your heart or your mind or relationships, because it will lead to bitterness, and bitterness brings death, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and bitterness is different than resentment. Bitterness is where things have turned sour, and resentment is a process of analyzing justice, logizomai, what's on the account. So if I'm going to be resentful towards Kimberly, I'm going to go, I did this and you did that. And then I'm always trying to get justice and fairness. And life isn't fair, But bitterness is where I've allowed that analysis to sour my heart.
Right.
And turn like cancer inside of me.
Brings death.
And so that's a little different. Well, I mean, it's really a powerful thing when you talk about what love is, and then when you go, what love is not. That's what Paul in the Genius of 1 Corinthians 13 talks about. So how does love act in contrast to these three? Let me just close with these. It insists on its own way. That's the problem. When love is not operating properly, it insists on its own way. So what can we do to realize it? Release your need to win and stop competing with those you love.
That's good.
Whether it's your kid, your spouse, your kids, your spouse, whomever it is. About irritableness. Check your heart when you're feeling insulted and say, is this a real insult? Was the person careless, or maybe didn't speak properly or whatever, and maybe you're just being thin-skinned, but the reality is people are going to say mean things. They're going to do it. And then ask yourself, am I judging their motives? Do I really know their motives? I said something the other day, and a couple of people took offense to it, and appropriately, and I talked to them on the phone individually, and in talking to them, I realized I had been offensive without even knowing it. But the beauty was they gave me so much grace. They said, we know your motive. We know your heart. But that was really easy to resolve that. Yeah.
For
it was
you.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for me to learn to grow in the way I communicate, but it's also was a good opportunity for us to bridge in our relationship.
And can I just say something to that too? The beautiful part of that is that you both wrapped your approaches in love, which is what brought the beautiful resolve, a learning lesson, a healthy, loving confrontation like that brings out the good results if everybody comes to the table with love.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then the last one is love isn't resentful. Release the offense of others, even if you can't reconcile with them. So
that's hard.
There may be a person that you need to release, but you still can't. They're too abusive, or they're a predator and you're their prey. And you may have to draw the line and say, I can't be close to you, but I'm releasing you and I forgive you. And I think that's a really important thing.
Yep.
Next time, we're going to talk a little bit more about what love is not. And then our final week, in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to talk about this superior, almost untouchable reality about love, believing, all of those things. It's just really high. So hope you'll listen to this. This is going to be a good series to share with friends who are struggling in their relationships. Invite them to join us at hoperescuepodcast.org.
Bye, guys.